Hello and welcome back to this panel about women in the public sphere. Straight away I want to hand over to Nairobi, because I think you will be introducing James Kamawira and his contribution to this panel.
Nairobi is very happy to bring to us James Kamawira, who is one of the few male panelists that we've had throughout the last 2 days. James Kamawira, he calls himself Kam, K-H-A-M. That is his name on the newspapers. He's one of our most renowned cartoonists in the country, working with a number of ladies and also working alone to provide cartoons and editorial cartoons to the various newspapers that we have in the country. And he's going to be speaking to us about the portraiture of women in the cartoon world. And he has a number of them that he's going to be using to demonstrate to us. Welcome, James.
Thank you, Sarah. And hello, South Africa, Nigeria. I'm honored to take part in this conference. And I have a few insights in patriarchy in the media. And not especially the media, but a section of the media that we call caricature or cartoons, because I am a social commentator using art. Before we can even talk about patriarchy in media, I think it would be prudent if we went back to patriarchy in society, because patriarchy in African society is something that is very cultural. And it starts even before we are born, because we came and found it there. I remember something specific that happened in my life. I mean, that's when I got actually to learn about patriarchy in society. I grew up in a very middle-class family, and my parents were very open, and I even at a very young age, probably 6, 7, 8, I loved cooking so much. I loved cooking things like eggs, pancakes and stuff like that. And I used to do that quite often at home. But one time I went to stay with my grandmother for a short time, and I entered her kitchen once, and I mean, she was very shocked when she found me trying to look for the pots and pans, and asked me what I was doing, and said I was going to cook pancakes. And she said, no, you shouldn't be in the kitchen. You are a man, you shouldn't be in the kitchen. I mean, that's when I started seeing patriarchy even in the society. And even now, as I became a cartoonist, I noticed something in the media. And the Kenyan media is dominated very, very, very heavily by I mean, the patriarchal domination is very heavy in the media, to the point that even for a woman actually to get to the very top in the media positions, it's very difficult. Of course, there are some women who are quite high up, but it is still heavily dominated by men. And one thing that I also learned, I'm still in the media and I'm still operating in the media. One thing that I also learned, and it was something that was actually even mentioned here by one of the women who took part in the general elections and lost. There is also a lot of corruption even in the media. And this, of course, men usually have that kind of muscle. They have the muscle, the financial muscle, even to muzzle women. Even in elections, we've seen that here in Kenya. In some places in Kenya, actually, women candidates have actually even been beaten up and stuff like that. But it is not to say that we haven't gone along. We have gone a long way, especially even with the new constitution that was promulgated in 2010. The space for women in political leadership is now very, very, very wide. of course, it takes time for even women to break through, because that domination is still there. The mindsets have not yet changed. It may be on paper, yes, but the mindsets have still not changed. So it will take some time, even for women themselves, some women themselves, to understand that they have got these opportunities. There is also something else that happens even during elections in this country, in that the media is so fond. I mean, the media is commercialized to a certain point that they will actually go for the biggest newsmakers. And the biggest newsmakers definitely are the people who are the strongest in the strongest parties, the strongest candidates, to the point where they actually relegate new entrants. And these new entrants, in most times, are women. They are relegated. They are not given media coverage or enough media coverage, and that is where that is where now the media actually fails women. They have the opportunities, but there are other bottlenecks that prevent even women from becoming exposed to even larger audiences. Now, what we as cartoonists have done, I have done lots of work for civil society on gender issues, and I have learned that I've always been very, very careful when it comes to portraying my cartoons, and I learned from a very early time in my career. There is one particular area that I would like to touch on, and this is something that is called something that as cartoonists call Wanjiku. Wanjiku is the name of that. It is actually a very common Kikuyu name for a lady, and Wanjiku. There is Wanjiku here. Any other Wanjiku? Another Wanjiku here. So it is also a very common name. Now, during the clamor for multi-party, during the clamor basically for a new constitution, there were numerous attempts made to put together a process, a constitutional process in this country, and it seemed that every time the process started, partisan issues would arise and would just go around in circles for a long time. And there is one thing that the former president of Kenya, Daniel Arap Moi, actually said very early in the debate, and he actually said that it would be desirable to have this process led by experts. And everybody was on his neck. No, you are trying to kill this thing and all that kind of stuff. He may have had his other reasons, but then he questioned in a public rally that how do you expect Wanjiku to write a constitution? That was his interpretation of trying to say, how do you expect an ordinary person who probably is uninformed, who is ignorant of the constitutional process, who is ignorant of even the terminology and the language that is used in writing the constitution, to actually write a constitution? You just go and get experts to come and write it. And everybody was on his neck saying, no. We want the input of the citizens. And these are the same citizens that he was calling Wanjiku. But there was something that he was trying to say, and it was the way he used Wanjiku was in a very negative way, meaning that most people actually did not understand the issues to do with the constitution and the only people who could do that were now foreign experts and all that kind of stuff. And I remember our first attempt to write a constitution was mired in so much confusion that actually the first attempt the first referendum actually failed so miserably. And the second time, that's when they actually sat down, and actually, what actually happened was that constitutional experts were called, and they are the ones who finally did the job. Of course, using the input that had been done by Mwananchi before, but they are the ones who put it together. So in 2010, we now got the new constitution, which everybody now was comfortable with, or rather, at least 70% of the country was comfortable with, and we had that, that constitution. Now, the thing is, the way us media took Wanjiku, we took Wanjiku in a completely different way. When we started illustrating Wanjiku, which is illustrated in some of the cartoons that we have with us here, portraying Wanjiku, is that we gave Wanjiku something that the president had not given her. The former president had not given her. We gave her knowledge. We gave her that intellectual capacity to understand the Constitution. We gave her the power to question even promises made by politicians and all that kind of stuff. We gave her the knowledge of even the Constitution, and that is how we stuck with it. So we turned around the ignorant Wanjiku and made her somebody, a symbol of now the society, not just that uninformed Wanjiku, but somebody who knew what she wanted and turned that into now the aspirations of Kenyans. So wherever, even today, somebody sees the image of Wanjiku, it is not that negative Wanjiku that had been created by somebody else, but this is now a new Wanjiku that we have created, a Wanjiku who is very, 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 very knowledgeable about the political situation and everything that goes on around her. I remember one time I actually did an illustration where I had Wanjiku in tattered clothes to represent the masses, the downtrodden masses in Kenya. And the person that I did the illustration for, I think it was Sarah, who is with us here. She actually asked me, "Is this the image of the Kenyan woman?" And I started actually thinking, by the way, is this the the image of the Kenyan woman? And apparently it is not the image of the Kenyan woman. Most Kenyan women, as even Sarah said, are a bit plump. It's not that all of them have stick legs and tattered clothes. Actually, even in the rural areas, you rarely find women in tattered clothes. But so I started now giving Wanjiku something better, but it was now a breed of Wanjiku that was urban and also rural. There was the urban Wanjiku, the rural Wanjiku, but both of them were equally knowledgeable. Now, this also brings the issue to us as cartoonists, how we have managed to do this. Most of cartoonists, it is not an agreement that we have had together to portray Wanjiku this way, but it is something that has been ingrained in us because of following the arguments and the debates that have been there on gender equity. Even now, when you look at the new constitution, it is very strong on women issues, and that is something that we respect, and it is something that we really strive for. It is quite unfortunate that in this gathering we have here, there are more women than men. We haven't met the 2/3 gender rule here, but that is something that that we can understand. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, James. I was going to actually ask James to help us understand how he would depict or draw the feminist, a woman who considers herself a feminist publicly. How would you depict her otherwise? And I must also say, for clarity's sake, that Wanjiku is a female name in Kenya. But now Wanjiku sort of personifies the ordinary aspirations of the ordinary woman in Kenya. So she is neither urban nor rural. She is the Kenyan woman. And I think we're going to be putting that in the dictionary. So, James, really, how do you depict a feminist? Because we were earlier on talking about the language, the images, and in terms of image, that's what really sticks. An editorial cartoon is worth more than a whole page in a newspaper.
That is a bit difficult to put, but I'll try and put it into context. There's one thing that I believe, and I think we have been discussing it here, even with the other panelists, is that when Sarah talks about a feminist, what is a feminist? There is that combative feminist, and then there is that silent feminist. Both of them, you do not have to be very loud to talk on women issues. We have here some, even in our panel, like a professor here, who is actually on my side when she says that. And Joan, who says actually there are two types of feminists. There is feminism can be actually contextualized in two ways. There is you called it the concept and the label. Now, the label probably is what Sarah is talking about. The label, the lady that is loud about women issues, and then there is the concept. You may be a feminist, but you're not so loud about it. But you actually advance issues to do with women, issues to do with young girls, and there are many of us who are there. So it is very difficult to say who is actually a feminist, who is not a feminist, because you do not have a label on your head saying feminist. You may be very loud on other issues. If there are women who beat up their men, their husbands, are those feminists? I really don't think so. But they are loud all the same. And then there are the women who do the things in a very, 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 very in a silent way, but they have a very great impact when it comes to issues to do with the gender equality.
I think we're back to you, Christine. Christine, we're back to you.
Thank you. I think in a minute we will go back to Nairobi to hear what the social media debate has thrown up. But I would suggest, because Sisonke is here and is online, that we her as well. Sisonke Msimang was the executive director at the Open Society Initiative for Southern Africa for many years until last year. She has worked in senior leadership positions for private foundations, UN agencies, and international non-profit organizations. And Sisonke, you write regularly for a range of media, including the Daily Maverick, Guardian, and the City Press. And you have been, in 2012, a Yale World Fellow, and you've been selected as a young global leader by the World Economic Forum. You have the platform now, and I think you're speaking about what kind of space do feminist organizations get in the media.
Okay, thanks very much. So, look, I think this has been an incredibly rich and interesting debate already. I had actually planned on talking about what it's like to be a feminist voice in the public sphere rather than about feminist organizations per se, but I'm happy to comment on that, Christine. So should I go with what I had planned? No, please go ahead. Then...
What you had in mind is what we go with.
Okay, thanks. So, you know, I think in... let me talk a little bit about my own journey in terms of a feminist voice. You know, as you've said, for years I worked for large institutions, and so when I wrote or spoke publicly, it was typically with the protection or the permission, depending on how you want to put it, of a large institution, and I was putting forward an institutional position. And then, but I was always, obviously, I'm trained in political science, and I was always very interested in debates about what's happening in the public sphere. And then in last year, I took a sabbatical and I went off to Yale, and it was the first time in a long time that I had actually the opportunity to not have very many expectations of me and just think, which doesn't happen a lot when you're working, unfortunately. And what became clear to me then was a few things. One was the fact that Africa is so peripheral. I hadn't realized it. You know, when you're an African living and working in Africa, you assume that we're important. Even though you know at the level of of sort of, you know, politics and debate, and you read things and you know that people don't take us seriously. But I hadn't fully understood how actually peripheral we are. So that was a nice eye-opener in a sense, because then I knew very much when you're in the belly of an Ivy League institution and you have all kinds of famous professors with Nobel Prizes coming to speak to you, and then you realize that none of them have an expertise on Africa or even know very much and aren't embarrassed about it, because why should they, right? So that was a useful realization. And then the second one was that despite being very, not even middle class, I would say elite, right? I mean, access to these institutions, having studied in the US and grown up all over the world and having all these nice jobs and so on. Sorry about that. Despite all of that, not being very technologically savvy and being a woman and being a feminist and not getting with technology, I was like, what am I doing, right? So I'm virgin. So one, Africa's peripheral. Two, we've got all these tools for the first time that especially elite people have access to, and I'm not getting with the program. And realizing that I was in a particularly important position, recognizing how on the outskirts we are as a continent, and recognizing that some capacity has been built in me to be able to access important global conversations. And so I was much more aware, that I think, than I've ever been of my own personal privilege and personal access. And so the time at Yale was very important because it made me realize that speaking out in my own personal voice was actually important. And it's a series of events happened that made it easy to resign. And to resign to build a public voice. So being very deliberate and conscious of what I was doing in the moment that I am in my career and the moment we are in sort of broadly in history in terms of access to technology, a set of skills, and also a sort of march of progress, which means that either some of us will become more important or some of us will become less important, and realizing that that's a real responsibility. So kind of taking the plunge and deciding to speak in my own name, in my own voice, and to do that quite deliberately has been an interesting journey as a feminist. And what it's meant was, one, do I, and it links to this debate about feminism, so do I then write publicly and in every piece say that I'm a feminist and say that I'm approaching this from a feminist perspective? Does that mean that my contributions to debates are primarily on the basis of issues around women's rights and what people would call women's issues? Or do I have a feminist lens on what's happening more broadly in the political space? And so what I've decided, but it's been a testing, it's an experimental thing, what I've decided is that my lens as a feminist is important to understand what's happening very broadly in terms of South Africa. So framing the political debates that unfold on a weekly basis, and often speaking strategically from a feminist perspective. So I've created a political party called WTF, which, pardon those of you with delicate ears, but as we all know in internet language, what WTF means what the fuck. But it's also a very fun way of asking questions about what the hell is happening in our country. And WTF is a political party of which I am the leader, a fake party obviously, and we ask questions that are in women's interest, where the question needs to be asked, like, what the fuck is going on here? So that's been one of the ways in which I found it important to play with feminism, but to influence discussions and debates from a feminist perspective, but to also play with the idea that we shouldn't, the feminists are often taken as people who are taken too seriously. So that's part of how I've done that. Let me just say a couple of more words about what it means to lose the institutional protection. What it means is that actually people feel free to attack you because they know that if they come at you when you're speaking with the protection of an institution, they're coming at the institution. So I can write a comment, even if at the end my piece would say these represent the views of, these are personal views and not the views of, you know, the Open Society, or they're not the views of the United Nations. You know, the protection of the institution was there, and it isn't open season. And I think speaking in your own name is different, and that people don't feel that that protection is there anymore, and so people feel that they can attack you directly, especially when they begin to see you as a public persona. People in the Cape Town office will say better than me. I'm certainly not a big name or anything like that, so I don't feel like I'm a public persona. But I think the column is beginning to develop a bit of a following, and so I do get sometimes that sense of people attacking me in my person because of my views. So that's been an interesting thing. You have to toughen up. You have to really think about it, and you have to factor that in. You factor that into the responses. So that's one. I think the other one is that often there's direct sexism. And having to interact in the Twitter world, I've watched the bullying behavior. And it's very interesting because men and women on social media do interact very differently. Women tend to be much more conciliatory and post differently. They post different kinds of comments. And I think men, because it's mediated, because you're not being seen, I think men feel much less afraid to be sexist in a way that I think they wouldn't feel were they standing in front of my face. So I think it's been an interesting learning curve for me in that sense. I'll stop there. I could say more, but it's a sort of disembodied experience talking to people in lots of different places. So I want to make sure I'm connecting with people, so I'll stop there.
Thank you, Sisonke. I think you have connected very well. Thank you for that. It's refreshing to hear from you as a person. Can I collect some views from the South Africa office?
Actually, the room is pretty quiet. I think we just want to say that I think, Sisonke, we do see you as, well, big is a big word, but you are significant in the political commentary scene. And I think, yeah, just to also note some of the comments on social media that have been coming through. I think one that really stuck out for me was somebody saying, oh, has the conversation gone now from challenging patriarchy to arguing about whether it's feminist or not? So that was just a comment I wanted to.
Big apologies. I want to hand this back to the Nairobi office and see if you have contribution or your social media online editor.
Like I was saying, online we have a few of the people who are following us identifying themselves as feminists, and of course there are others who are being silent, just contributing to the debate of labeling the term feminist and the concept of feminism. That's pretty much what the conversation going on, leading from the question whether it's wrong to be called a feminist. So those are the responses that are coming out, the same discussions we've been having. The only question that has come up so far is people would like to know how to connect to the WTF organization. If we could get more details about that, that could be really helpful.
So WTF is a satirical party, right? So if you go to the dailymaverick.co.za, you'll find my column and you'll find my picture, and there's a number of articles about WTF. Unfortunately, it's quite South Africa specific. We've had a few, I've done a few columns about other countries, but it's more of satire and a joke about what the world might look like if the people asking the questions were women with ordinary common sense rather than men. So it's not a real political party. It's a satirical one for the purposes of the column.
Okay, were there more questions on social media?
No more questions from the social media for now.
Can we test the Cape Town office? We did cut somebody short there, and I could only apologize with a smile. I hope you saw it. Let us try once more. Karen, can you pick up the microphone and just see whether we can hear you?
Yeah, what I was saying was that yeah, in the discussion, what was missing so far is how patriarchy is also the source of heterosexism and homophobia. And in South Africa, we have a lot of black lesbians that at the hands of patriarchy is being killed. And I think that's important in the discussion as well. And when we talk about gender machinery yesterday, we it's also important to look at the LGBTI constituency in challenging patriarchy, and not to always have it as a separate discussion, but can we have it as part of our discussion on challenging patriarchy, so that it's not just about women and men. I think we are starting to look broader now. Maybe we've just missed it because there wasn't a particular speaker on it, but I think it is important. So maybe some of the people can comment. I know that there's a saying in Africa that it's un-African to be gay. I just didn't want this to slip out of this progressive space, because that's not what we really stand for. Thank you.
Hi. I have a comment and a question. So I just wanted to just show solidarity and applaud you, I guess, if that's the word, for all the work that you're doing in social media. I really love that social media is adding a different aspect to feminist discourse, as well as being able to articulate alternative narratives for us as women, and very specifically what I'm engaged in Black feminism as Black women. So through Twitter, through Facebook, and through blogs, we're able to articulate, her story, as opposed to, the history that is typically written, by the patriarchal society, which I love. And I've also started this thing on my computer called Truth Files, which is really getting all what I believe to be an alternative truth to a lot of stories out there through blogs, through Twitter, and through Facebook, so that I'm able to educate, my siblings, and perhaps if I have kids in the future, my children. So I really love that about social media. And I think that WTF is amazing, because although some people, I think WTF may be a little vulgar, I'm also very vulgar in articulating my feminism. And so it's really great to be able to sometimes get some of those swear words in there and some other words that I definitely feel like articulate the passion, the fierceness, and the depth of the struggle in my language that doesn't have to be politically correct. But I also wanted to ask you, I think this is a typical question when we're talking about movement building, and it's just about bridging the generation through social media. Social media is about a lot of young folks who are using it. Even in the room and on Twitter, again, it's a lot of young people who are using these mediums, and I feel like we're missing out on a lot of discourse from different generations. And I wanted to know, how do you think we can bridge that gap via social media, and if that even needs to be the focus? I mean, we're kind of already going into being a technological world in various spaces. So should that be it? And actually, my second question is, as far as activism, with there being, again, a technology gap between different social classes, how do you reach out with your social media to those who may not necessarily have access to computers or, Twitter or smartphone?
I assume that we've heard a contribution from South Africa asking how the dialogue can continue on social media. I guess, part of this conference is that dialogue on social media. So what I would like to do for this particular panel, having raised a few issues from the various countries that we all work in, I want to say thank you. The one translation of feminist we had in this office from Nigeria that I think had the most thumbs up was "more than a woman." And I think with that, I can hand back to Nairobi with your conclusion or concluding words. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, Christine, for steering us so ably. Nairobi has one or two comments before we hand over the microphone to Katrin, the regional director, to wrap up and invite us to the next sessions. And I'll start with my own, what I see as one of the things that I think we need to interrogate. One, assuming and believing that we now have quite a huge team of women that have taken positions in editorial boards as cartoonists, in the administration of newspapers and media in general, and both electronic, social media, and print media. Is the presence of the women editors and the presence of women journalists, is it making a difference in the way we are portraying other women? Are we changing the labels because we are there as women? That's one. The other one is that earlier on, when we were dealing with the political sphere, we had our women complain about blackouts by the media. And you know, when you go out to campaign in the villages where the citizenry are located and seated where the votes are, you really don't go twittering and you don't go on Facebook. You don't raise your votes on Facebook. Primarily in the countryside, you raise your votes via radio, via word of mouth. You walk to the bypasses and so on. And so when a woman like that gets a blackout or gets very little portraiture or is depicted negatively, I think we need to begin to ask ourselves, how do we then re-educate the journalists? How do we re-educate even the female journalists so that they are able to begin looking at the voices that ordinarily do not make news? And the news-making parameters obviously do not include the voices of the weak, the women, the minorities. So I think that we need to interrogate those issues as we look at new strategies. And I'm saying that I do think that we, one, need to explore traditional community media as an option, or at least as one of the alternatives, energize it and put in a little more investment in it, because that is where we will find the bulk of the grassroots and the energy that is going to propel women to leadership and to break patriarchy. And in any case, patriarchy is more seated with the people who have the least education and so on. And therefore, I think that we need to take this discourse a little further to asking ourselves how we really touch the root of patriarchy and where women themselves have actually embodied and personified and almost perpetuate patriarchy to the level where you know, it becomes almost the accepted norm, so to speak. But in addition to that, how we re-educate our journalists and how we penetrate the social media and all the media that we have, so that then we can begin to, one, give spaces to women and women issues and get practicing journalists to really articulate issues of women and gender equality in a more balanced and objective way. And having said that, I'd like to give over the microphone to Julia, who is one of our female journalists in our public broadcaster, Kenya Broadcasting Station. Thank you.
Hello, Nigeria and South Africa. I'd like to begin with what you talked about, blackouts from female candidates, especially during the elections. One thing that I think people need to appreciate and is a big challenge in media is who owns the media. If you look outside, maybe the public broadcaster, like you said, KBC, you'll see most of these other media houses are owned by, number one, politicians, and number two, those politicians are men. And what happens here in Kenya is that they have a huge say about the content. So it's not really the blackout in terms of, did we go out to cover? It's the blackout in terms of, was it allowed to be aired? Because if this is a politician and a media owner, this is someone who, number one, has the tools, and number two, is also an interested party. So if you take that footage there, it'll either be edited out and turned into a completely different story from what you covered. If you covered the angle of violence, you'll be surprised at what happens in the newsrooms. If you cover the angle of violence, that this is what happened to this woman, it will be edited out maybe to give the impression that, hey, we are changing, we are allowing more women. And you know, that's going to be like 30 seconds, and that's going to be probably just before we go for the international news break. And research has shown that's where people start flipping the channels. So that story, even if it did go on air, the number of people who saw it, you know, is very minimal. So one of the challenges in media, and that's an issue that we have raised before, is the issue of media ownership. Who owns it and the interest they have in media. Something else also that affects female journalists, especially I have gone through this, when you start covering women issues, maybe development and leadership, they start labeling you as an activist. So that even when you're walking around in the newsroom, they call you an activist or a lobbyist, or they believe you're in the pocket of some NGO out there. They do not treat you with the same seriousness as maybe someone who's covering sports and maybe something like that. So we have had to put sustained effort to ensure that we get features that are just as long. We cannot have features for sports that go for 30 minutes and you want us to do a gender story or a women's story in 5 minutes, which, by the way, in the middle, you have a commercial, an announcement. So we have really put concerted efforts in KBC. I don't know about other media houses, but now we are given equal space. And then, like you said, finally, I think even just from the basics, and not necessarily media, it's interesting how I do both English and Swahili. And there's a Swahili word, mtu. This word means person. But even when you're walking out in the street, and I saw this with my nephew, he's just 4. And the other day he was telling me, ona ule mtu, that's Swahili for look at that person. But when I turned back, there was a woman between the person my nephew meant and this woman. So I said, oh, Yule, like, oh, this lady. And he said, no, I said mtu. So you see, this is so basic that even a word like mtu, which basically means person in Swahili, has somehow become man. When you say mtu, you're not talking about a person. You're talking about a man. So maybe even when we change some of these perspectives, it needs to start from way, way early. So I think that's my contribution. Thank you very much.
Oh, Christine, do you want me to respond to the questions before they wrap up the panel?
There's also the issue of women agreeing to be covered. Sometimes I have experienced this quite a number of times. Getting a woman to actually come on radio and speak about some of these issues is difficult, to say the least. I understand that some of the things is because a woman, if you're put out there to speak, sometimes even from the social media, people start digging up issues about you. They start saying, oh, she's a divorcee, what does she know about marriage? She has not been able to keep her family together, what is she coming to tell us? So also those are some of the issues that I understand keep women from maybe wanting to be covered by the media. But the flip side, I believe, that women need to know is that if you do that, maybe you're also creating the impression that you know you are not allowed to. So it cuts both ways, that maybe there are these issues you're concerned about, but also because I know in politics and in leadership, visibility is key. So if every time they put on the radio, it's this man that's talking, you'll be surprised when sometimes you're having a discussion on cervical cancer and it's men who call. And they say, I'm calling on behalf of my wife. I'm calling on behalf of my mother. So you see, even the impression you may be creating out there is that you're not allowed to speak. So that then when you speak, the first reaction is why? Why are you even speaking instead of what are you saying? Yeah, thanks.
I just have some few thoughts because I think what this debate is telling us is that there is a lot of work that it's out there that we must do to really deal with issues of equality and how women advance their own rights. And one of my thoughts is that picking on what you are saying, that women may not be coming, but I also think it's good to unpack why they don't. And you gave some few thoughts. I think that we need to encourage women and build space and enhance their capacity so that they can be comfortable to speak in the media even when they know many things have happened against, they have happened to the women who've come up to speak openly about issues of oppression. The second thing, because here there's been a lot of speaking about social media, and I think it's very, very important. But we also have to understand a lot more times social media is personal. It is me and my Facebook, it is me and what I am doing, me and my WhatsApp. So I'm talking about myself. And then what happens to those women who really are doing a lot of work? And I think it's it's important for people in the media and those who are able to actually get to the social media and start really collecting the struggles, the contribution of those women and really feeding into those social media so that it's not just about me, but it's also about the community and the contribution they are making to fight patriarchy. And I think also making women at the local level being media material that will really push the people in the media to go on the ground and really pick that information. And what we've been doing as an organization more recently especially is nurturing grassroots women who are organized in groups to make songs, to make poems about their own empowerment. So it is good to sing about God, and I love God and I believe in God. But I think we've pushed women so much, all that they sing is about God, and it's important. But we really also have to balance that women can also sing about their own empowerment, and that goes to the media, and they can sing for whoever or for any ceremony and sing about what they've been able to confront. And that will help us also to be able to deal with all these issues, because there are many and no one can do it alone.
All right, I think the microphone is over to me in order to finish and wrap up. But before I do that, of course, I want to check in with our two offices in Cape Town and in Nigeria. Is there anything, because I think we've capped the microphone quite a bit here around the table, so I want to give this one last opportunity. First to Cape Town and then to Nigeria, just to say, are we really at the end of this conversation, or do you have anything to add? Karen, Christine, how's the situation in Abuja?
We've gone a bit quiet too. We've been listening. I'm off camera, but I'm still here. And we're happy if you want to conclude from your place. Thank you.
All right. I hope that the feeling that I'm getting in those here in this room and also in the two places is the happy exhaustion after 3 very intense days. Looking back at those 3 days, I think we all are going to ask ourselves what has actually happened. I think a lot has happened in the last 3 days. And not the least, we've been testing a medium, we've been testing a format that was very new to all of us. A possibility to connect ourselves through Google Hangouts, through technologies, through Twitter, Facebook, and so on. And obviously, we had our frustrations with the technology, and we also have to still work our ways to really feel comfortable with it. But I have to say, looking back, I believe that those frustrations were very well worth it, and for a couple of reasons. I think there were fantastic moments when this kind of connectivity that we wanted actually happened. We were able to connect across large physical distances here in Africa, and we also had contributions from people more globally through social media. I think that was definitely, those are the moments that are leading us to believe that this will be the future in many ways of connecting people. I also think that the first day when we started off with Shireen's excellent keynote, which I think echoes in the heads of many of us still, by connecting our debate on gender equality with a much larger debate and a much larger project, the project of justice, the project of equality, and making sure that we are seeing this in our discussions as the bottom line. I also, from the reactions from the social media side, I think we started a lot of debates here, a lot of questions also around concepts. On the first day, there was lots of questions around what is actually patriarchy? What are we talking about? How do we define this? And how does it manifest itself? And I think that's a very worthwhile conversation, and I think it's actually continuing. I also think when we're looking into these 4 very interesting areas that we've been tackling, we have reached what we wanted. We have been creating new spaces to think. We've been creating, or we've been talking about new strategies. I can't do any justice in going into any detail, but I know that especially here on the site in Kenya, in Nairobi, and the sessions you did not see online and you were not part of reflected to me how much thinking there was actually going on, and how much this is actually possibly, again, the beginning, the start of something else, something more that will continue. So the frustration with the technology hopefully was also worthwhile, because we've created a testimony, something that still exists, that is visible for people, that people can still engage and involve with, that is on the internet, and we will continue having these discussions and also stimulating those discussions. Possibly what we didn't have is a little bit more of an informal exchange, the possibility to see each other outside of this screen across the 3 offices. I think that's what I'm personally also missing. Innovative ideas, good conversations that are happening over a meal, over tea, in a break. So we have to see how we are going to make up for that. But I do want to end by saying thank you, of course, a big thank you. I'm not going to be able to name all the people specifically. We have had teams working in all 3 offices, tireless, and for those who are not aware, this conference has been in the making for the past, I would say, 5 or 6 months. So a lot of work, a lot of effort went into it. So a very, very big thank you to everyone steering us through this process, and a very big thank you to all the participants here in the offices, but also online, that have been staying with us over the past 3 days. And with this, I do want to conclude this conference. This conversation will be staying, as I said, online. It will be facilitated, moderated. We are going to provide more inputs. We're inviting people back to our website to say, look at the resources, look at the discussions. They're still on. You still have a chance to also participate. And you've seen Judith with me here in the background. She is continuously also going to look at what kind of conversations get started, and also need inputs further online. So this will be on until the end of November, and we hope we'll see you there. Thank you so much. Thanks to South Africa. Thank you to Nigeria. I guess we're all going to go out and have a bit of a party now.